Okay, then let me back to the second topic of today's presentation, which is introducing South Korean the histories and economy and trade political system. Okay, let me show this. This is pretty impressive pictures. These pictures, do you see? This is the devastated city. The city's name is Daejeon. Daejeon is a pretty large city. I think third or fourth largest city in South Korea. This photo is taken in the 1950, in the right after the Korean War. And can you find any big building here? You may watch the Ukraine War, and when you watch the Ukraine War, you can see some the main buildings, but here, nothing left. This is not the exaggeration. Because of the Korean War, totally everything, almost everything, is destroyed. After the Korean War, our political system was really bad. We struggled to establish democracy. This is the 1960, the April 19 of 1960. We call the April 19 revolutions. And as you see, this revolution ignited not by the politician, but look at these pictures. All the protesters wear the school uniform. They are high school or university students. So these students ignite the democratic movement, and they heavily protest against the government and because of the fraud in national elections. So because of the April 19 revolution, we start to re-establish democracy. But right after this revolution, we also have another coup d'etat, led by the General Park Chung-hee. And we had the Dark Age until to the 1987. Imagine almost 27 years the authoritarian or almost dictatorship in South Korea. Civil war and the dictatorship. But as of the 21st century, 2021, you may remember Korea not by those pictures, but these pictures. Daejanggeum, BTS, or this guy, Gangnam Style, yeah, Parasite, and Professor Kim Kong-ko. I hope to be a part of this Korean wave, though, but totally changed from the devastated country to a country reading international culture. What happens? Okay, geographic situation. You know, we are surrounded by so many big countries and the the neighborhood, the North Korea. We call them brothers, but the brothers are necessarily friendly and sometimes very hostile. And so there's the North Korea and the China and the Russia and Japan and somewhere the United States. So we are surrounded by the four big nations. National security is a big issue. Well, this kind of the geographical situation is pretty interesting. Always, many South Koreans think survival is the matter. We did not imagine the prosperity. Our primary goal was survival. Survival from the threat from the North Korea. Survival from the poverty. That was the missions that our former generations had. And nowadays, we move toward a different mission though. Second, if you look at this kind of palace and the big building, you may think the South Korea is very peaceful, but we also have many challenges, and one of the challenges is the aging society. Aging society is really terrible. You know, the population is almost 50 million these days, but unfortunately, the birth rate has decreased over years, and the total fertility rate, the crude fertility rate in 2021 in South Korea was 0.81. 0.81 means the one of lowest, I think the lowest, the fertility rate in OECD countries. So some bad things happens in South Korea, and this is the number of births per 10,000, and it dropped very significantly from the 42 in the 1960 to the 5.9 in the 2019. Big challenges. So do you think that the Korea will collapse because of the low birth rate? Well, I don't know, because when I was a boy, at the time, the population was around the 30 million or something. And many people say 30 million is too many. Since at the time, we had too many population. Korea is too dense. But nowadays, we have the 50 million. So even our population dropped to the 30 million, that would not mean the collapse of South Korea. What we concern is not the number of the population, but the speed of the aging society. We have to quickly adjust to the new challenges, but it is very difficult. Okay, let's move on to the economy. South Korean economy is really terrible. But before talking about the secret of the economic development, we have to talk about this one, 5-year economic plan. This is very challenging and the tricky part of the economic development in South Korea. Many people say this 5-year economic plan play crucial roles explaining the economic growth of South Korea. But plan is just a plan. We cannot say that this plan is actually implemented. But good news to us is from the older period, you can see the economic imbalance, expand the social overhead capital, and improve the balance of payment by export, reforestation. Yeah, this is interesting. SDG, reforestation. Do you know why the government put the reforestation as the major goals of the economic plan? Because of the war. Many mountains is almost devastated, and we didn't have enough natural resources. People had to cut wood in the mountain to use as the fuel. So we did not have many trees at the time. Now you see this beautiful landscape, mountainous landscape, but back to this 1960s or the 70s, we did not have that many trees in the mountains. So that was the reason we put this reforestation as the primary goal. And food self-sufficiency. We suffer from the shortage of the food. We had to purchase the food from other countries, but unfortunately, we didn't have the money. So we had to improve productivity in agricultural sectors. So that is related, so-called 새마을 운동. New village movement is also related to this food self-sufficiency goals. So as you see, there are different goals in different period. And in the late 1970s, the Korean government also proposed this heavy chemical industries. The government wanted to promote heavy chemical industry. There is the pros and cons of these goals. Still in the 1970s, in the late 1970s, Korean government and the Korean economy actually did not have enough capital to invest. Heavy industry require huge amount of investment. Because of shortage of the money, the government had to allocate this money to this heavy chemical or heavy industries. So this results in very close relationship between the government and the business. And this distorts our democratic system. So you may hear that the 재벌 in South Korea, and this 재벌 actually could promote and could grow because of this, the support of the government. Some people say this is good, but many Koreans think that the support of the 재벌 distort the market system, distort the political system as well. So but in the late 1970s, we had to move toward this new industries. Okay, then 1997 economic crisis. I think I explained this before. After successful implementation of 5-year economic plan, 1980s was heyday of Korean economy. 1988, there was the Seoul Olympic, and during this 1980s, the economic growth of South Korea is very, very fast, and also there was successful structural change in Korean economy. At the time, Samsung started the business of semiconductors. And the Korean Telecom, at the time, the Korean government owned the company. Korean Telecom started to business of the telecommunications. Before this, the 1980s, many houses could not have landline telephone system. But after that, then in the 1980s, we developed the automatic, there is the specific term though, but we tried to develop the new technology to connect the telephone, the calls. So this new technology helps us to have more telephone at home. So based on this telecommunication technology, we can move toward the PCS or the cell phone and other, the third or fourth generation of telecommunication technology. It started in the 1980s. And Hyundai Motors started its business in the major business started in the 1970s. But at the time, the business was just combine, assemble the part, import the engine from the Japan, and import some part from the other country, but they just assemble this part and produce the car. Quality of the car was very bad, so Hyundai was called in United States as Hyundai. Hyundai, you know, the main Americans said because of its poor quality, the high risk of the traffic accidents. So many Americans portray this Hyundai as the Hyundai. Sorry, my joke is a little bit out of date. But anyway, but in the 1980s, the Hyundai started to develop its own engines. Based on the domestic technology, they tried to develop its own the engine systems. and so on forth. How can this be possible? Many people say this change is because of the entrepreneurs, the businessmen. But I also add one more part. This change was possible because of very important and very dedicated policymakers. I want to name the one person whose name is the Kim Jae-ik. Kim Jae-ik, actually one of you may got the scholarship from his family. He died in the 1982 or something because of the terrors in Myanmar done by the North Korea. But Kim Jae-ik was the designer of the Korean economy in the 1980s. The major point what he raised was, if private company wants to do something, then let them do it. Before the 1980s, always the government tried to plan, design, and give the guidance to the private companies. But in the 1980s, the policy shift toward the business. So if they have real confidence in doing business, let them do it. So Samsung case was very interesting. In the 1970s, Samsung wanted to start the semiconductor business, but it couldn't. The government told that, oh, it is too expensive. We did not have the technology. How can you survive? So this is the waste of money. Stop it. Samsung, also the government discouraged to develop the local engines attempted by the Hyundai Motors. All the economic activities was controlled by heavily controlled by the government. But in the 1980s, the economic policies shift toward the pro-business. That was the big change, but people underestimate. We may think the market-friendly system is automatically achieved, but I can say definitely no. The reason is, look at the former USSR countries, like Belarus, or the Ukraine, or other countries, many Kazakhstan, or other countries in the Central Asia. They, after collapse of Soviet Union, do they achieve the democracy and the market system? May not. Why? They didn't have the experience of the market system. Market experience is not the natural things. It needs a lot of the training. It needs the huge amount of the knowledge. Unfortunately, if we don't have, then it is not easy to adopt these ideas. But in the 1980s, Korean government did. So after this kind of rapid economic structure change and the development, we had a big problem here. 1997. This shock was really, really immense in South Korea. 1997, we believed that we had enough resources, technology, and enough manufacturing companies. We could support ourselves. We had the confidence, but the foreign currency system collapsed. So this is the growth of the debts. So in the 1997, this is the short term, the external debts. So the rapid increase of the short-term gross debt and then the decrease. But the puzzle comes from here. Do you see? The short-term debts decrease. But do you see any kinds of the rapid increase of the debts in Korea? No. Long-term, short-term debts? No. This is 1997. Not much increase of the debts, external debts, short-term and long-term. People realize that at the time we may use too much money. So because of the too much expenditure, we face the financial crisis. But reality is no, it's not. There was the another reasons. It was related to the change of the global order. We realize that although we have sound economy, if we fail to defend our economy according to the change of the global order or the global economy, we may fail. That was the lessons from this Asian financial crisis. So the Korean government started to change its economic system from the localized to the globalized one. So this changed a lot the South Korean economic and the social system. At the time, many people talk about the globalizations, many talk about the global standard, and we try to adopt more devices from the international organizations. Unfortunately, many of these advice was turned out wrong, but basic spirit was right. We cannot remain as a small country in Asia. We have to embrace the idea of the globalizations. So then, this one, the major challenge was not because of debts, but because of the financial system. Here, there's the correlate surge up to the almost the 25%. Can you imagine that? The interest rate is surge up to the 25%. And this kind of the increase of the interest rate is happened very in a short time. And this dashed line shows the exchange rate, and this exchange rate is up to the 1,800 Korean won per dollars, which is very high. So the Korean won is too much depreciated. So this means that financial crisis, not the crisis because of the weak industries or the weak economic systems. Okay, let's move on to the other the economic growth rate. Overall, compared to the world or the OECD, from the 1990 to the 2020, Korea always show the higher economic growth rate compared to the OECD countries or the average world level. And this is the Asian financial crisis. And thankfully, look at this. This is the 2008 global financial crisis. Korea didn't have much impact. And this is the COVID-19 impact in 2020. Economic growth rate is just minus 0.9%, which is pretty higher than other OECD countries. So we learned a lot from the Asian financial crisis. We transform our economic systems, and this makes us to survive during these two successive crises. And let's see, government responses. Let's see. Let's move on to the other part, trade part. You may be interested in that how Korean government continuously develop its economy. The secret is we adopt not import replacement strategy, but export-driven strategy. So this the shaded side. This is the export of goods and service, and this is the import of the goods and service. Always the export is the size of export is larger than the imports. So the Korean government enjoy some level of the surplus of the trade, and this surplus of the trade is reinvested to increase its competitiveness. And also, as you see, the trade relationship is very interesting. Before 1990, before the 2000, the trade relationship, our biggest trade partner was the United States. But look at this. This is I think the 2019, and in the case of 2019, we got huge surplus, trade surplus from the Hong Kong, China, Vietnam. I'm sorry, Da Hong, but we did not take your money. The reason we got the surplus from the Vietnam is we export so many parts of our iced tea products. In Vietnam, there is big companies run by the Samsung. There is the factories run by the Samsung, and the LG also has the huge factories in the Vietnam. So we have to export some parts of these iced tea products. So that's the reason we got the surplus from the Vietnam, not exploiting it, but okay. And the Hong Kong and China. This is the reason that why national security problem in South Korea is very complicated. As you know, the Korea has very good tie, very good relationship, diplomatic relationship, and the military relationship with the United States. However, the economy-wise, we have very good relationship with China. So we have to balance out these kinds of things. And we had the huge deficit to the Japan, Saudi Arabia. This is pretty, I think, natural because we import so much oil directly from the Saudi Arabia. Australia, why is that so? We have to import many natural resources from the Australia as well. Germany, Michael. We also have to import advanced manufacturing facilities from the Germany. So this is our trade partners. So we got the surplus from the China and Hong Kong, and also deficit from the Japan and the Saudi Arabia, the Middle Eastern countries. Okay, and this is the also important part to understand the Korean economy. We have very high rate of self-employment. Self-employment means that after retirement, you may open your BBQ shop or the restaurants and so forth. And we have very high rate of the self-employment rate. Among the OECD countries, our rate is very high like this. So this is the reason that COVID-19 impacts would be very huge because the self-employment business cannot protect themselves, and they heavily negatively impacted by the social distancing policies. Okay, and the infrastructures. This is also very impressive. The infrastructures, there was the big gap of the infrastructures. In the 1970s and 80s, the government, the Korean economy rapidly increased, rapidly grow. It means that the Korean society needed the more infrastructures. But government actually did not have enough money. And also, the inflation was a big issue at the time. So the more investment for the SOC or the infrastructure means higher inflation. So government tried to control providing these infrastructures. So that was the reason that we had very poor infrastructure. If we look at this all, we have the very heavy traffic jams. But since the 1990s, the government changed its policy directions. So first, the shortage of the money. To overcome this shortage of the money, the government tried to establish special fund, which should be used only for SOC projects. So this special fund provides the very stable money to construct the infrastructure in South Korea. So because of that, we start to expand our railway system, highway system, also high-speed railway systems. And also we can construct lots of the airports and so forth. So that was the very unique part in the 1990s. And also the account is the 1993 acts on special account for traffic facilities. This would be, I think, pretty good the ideas for the developing countries. The special account for traffic facilities is specialized to develop the infrastructures. So you know what? The many developing countries usually rely on the foreign direct investment or the ODA fund to develop the infrastructures, but that is not sustainable. But rather than rely on these external sources, Korea tried to domestic fund to develop the traffic facilities. That's also the notable things. Is there any problem with the SOC in Korea? Yes, definitely. One is, the first thing is the deteriorated buildings. Our building is getting older. So we needed to reconstruct or demolish the building and construct the new ones. So the Korea tried to build more the new building, and we have the Harlem in the downtown areas. Many people move out to the suburban area, so in the center areas of the cities, few people live. So this areas becomes the deserted area. So we have to re-establish the business in the center of the urban areas. I like that. And also, what's that? Okay. This one. This SOC nowadays utilize the new technologies. We have the aging SOC. So the two, they get over this problem. We try to adopt this digital New Deals. Then if you move around, if you travel to the other part of the South Korea, you can use the highway system. And in the highway, do you find any toll gate? Nowadays, there is the toll box who get the manually collect the fare, but the majority of the toll gate is the automatically collect the money using the internet systems or the other Wi-Fi system, the wireless technologies. So we move toward that kinds of the directions. And you know, the interesting experience, we use the navigation system. So this navigation can disperse the traffic jam. So if there is heavy traffic jam one places, and this navigation system tell us, advise us the other directions. So this also alleviate the heavy traffic jam. Also, the increase the efficiency of the SOCs. Like that, we try to utilize more technology like that. Okay, let's stop. I will stop up to this. The welfare system. The Korean the society is very interesting because the many Koreans criticize themselves, saying that this Korean society is very unfair. And if we look at this social economic polarization, this is the Gini coefficient. This Gini coefficient in South Korea is around 0.35. This is I think the 2019, and this is P19 means the 19th percentile, and versus the 10th percentile. So this relative ratio, and the South Korea show that also the higher this ratio, which means very unequal society. But compared to the other society, we cannot say South Korea is very unequal society. It is unequal society, but not necessarily very unequal society. But we usually think we are located this way. Many Koreans really concerned with the high Gini coefficient. Tell you the secret. You see this, the Gini coefficient 0.35, but this number is not actually wrong. This is the politically chosen. The Moon administration choose the different Gini coefficients. Before the Moon administration, we use the international, the standard the Gini coefficients, which is showed our Gini coefficient level is almost around this one, 0.31. So the income inequality is not as bad as people imagine. And one of the remarkable thing is this level of the Gini coefficients has maintained even during the 1980s and the 1990s, which means that despite rapid economic development, Korean society maintained pretty stabilized income inequalities. Lots of the Koreans underestimate this part, but many Chinese scholars or the Vietnamese scholars want to know the secret. How could Korean society maintain the level of the low income inequalities? The secret is, you know what? How much the chairman of the Samsung earned the salary? Compared to the U.S., the chairman of the United States, the Korean chairman actually earned very little. Nowadays, they earn like $1 million, something like that. But before the 2000s, in Korean society, even the chairman could not have the large salary as Western CEO had. And the salary system is not based on the performance. The salary system is based on age. Getting older, getting more money. This is the best fair system. Everybody has to getting older. So everybody has the chance to get more money. So that kinds of the Korean system also alleviate the income inequalities. And so forth. The factors behind this one. So welfare system in South Korea was not that serious problem because majority of welfare was taken care by the family. But after economic development, family could not support their members anymore because their original family live in the rural area, but their children move to the urban area. Then how the children can take care of their parents in the rural area? So the more and more the importance of the welfare systems becomes the issues the policymakers. So our systems gradually move on to the welfare states. The Korean welfare systems is pretty interesting in many senses. First, among the Korean welfare system, the best part is, I think, the public healthcare system. Have you visited the hospital in South Korea? I think the hospital system is the best, not necessarily best, but I travel the Singapore, the United States, some European countries, but I think pretty much accessible, cheap, and pretty good. Although I pay lots of the insurance to the government though, but you don't need to pay much. I'm rich, I do. You're poor, so I will take care of you. That's fair system. But anyway, the public health system was good, but we failed in housing. Housing policy was the nightmare in South Korea. Education. That is also paradoxical. South Korea spends so much money for the education. However, they very much dissatisfied with the education quality. I don't know why, but So because of that, many people are still concerned that we need more expenditure for the welfare policies. And we made a big mistake the last administration. The reason is the Korean welfare expenditure has grown very steady way. And nowadays, it increased very rapid manner though. Already, since the 1990s, the Korean government gradually adopted the welfare system. And this expenditure also gradually increased. But the last administration tried to expel this expenditure. So I expect that the welfare expenditure in South Korea will exponentially grow very soon. The one evidence comes from here. South Korea's welfare expenditure level is just 12%. So some people say that out of the total GDP, only 20%, 12% of the money is for the social spending. So people say the welfare expenditure in South Korea is very small, but I totally disagree with this because our national pension system started very recently. So if our national pension system tried to give the money to the retired, then this expenditure will rapidly increase. We get into the growing aged society, and since 2 years ago, we have more and more the retired baby boom generations. So definitely this social the spendings will very quickly increase, and pretty much they quickly reach to the OECD level. So always when you try to interpret the ideas or the experience of South Korea, you always think about some kinds of time lag. Korean society rapidly change, but if your society does not have that kinds of adaptation, then you should not quickly adopt the ideas of the South Korea. So we had these kinds of the threat from the North Korea, threat from the global economy, and the threat from the aged society. We have many threats, and we had to quickly respond to it. We could make many mistakes, but if your country is very stable, then you find the better the stabilized policy. But if your country has the capacity to adapt rapidly changing environment, then you try to look at the Korean case. How South Korea quickly adapt to the different challenges or different quick rapid change of the environment. Okay, so I think this would be enough because I don't want to use too much time to introduce everything. Because I have to sell my book. So this is tiny part of the book contest. So if you are interested in, you can purchase the book. And some students may say, "Oh, Professor, you are already rich. Why do you sell the books?" And my answer is, the reason I sell this book is I will donate this money for our school. Okay, so money does not come to my pocket, but goes to our school. Thank you very much for your attention.